Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Born to Heal podcast. I am joined today again by Bryant Meyers, who's previously been on the show to talk about PEMF, but today we're going to talk about red light therapy. Bryant, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's along with PEMF, it's my main thing I'm interested in. So, and I wrote a book. I mean, I got a book written on red light therapy, but it's not published yet. But it's hopefully within a year.
I love it. Well, and I've also previewed your book and it's excellent. So I'm excited for that to come out for everyone. But in the meantime, you're going to share your wisdom with us today about red light.
Yes, absolutely.
So I would love to start by, can you describe what red light therapy is and what it's used for?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually referred to in research literature as photobiomodulation is the new word, right? In fact, some of the top researchers kind of frown upon the phrase red light therapy, but I like it because it's so descriptive. And photobiomodulation for most people is like, what the heck is that, right? So I like it just because it's very straightforward. It's red light therapy. So we're using red, and actually it's red and near-infrared light. So it's more accurate. A lot of times in my book, I would say red and near-infrared, or just sometimes red. But when I say red light therapy, I imply that it includes the near-infrared as well, because those are what activate, cytochrome C oxidase to help produce ATP, right? That's the very well-known mechanism. So red light therapy is a lot more natural than you might think. The sun, when you're out in the sunshine, not only are you getting vitamin D, but I think it's upwards to 40 to 50% of the spectrum of the sun is red and near infrared. So we're getting that. If we're outdoors in the sun, we are getting therapeutic amounts of red light therapy, you could say. But, there's obviously some caveats. Obviously, if you overdo it, you get sunburned, and people aren't spending enough time outside, where people are just spending 93% of their time indoors, if you include car travel. So we're literally hardly ever getting outdoors anymore, as much as we did our ancestors, right? So we do get red and near infrared from the sun, but because we're not getting enough outdoor exposure, and because the problem of obviously getting sunburn and skin cancer if you overdo the sun, red light therapy is a big solution to a lot of, the benefits are like A to Z. If we went through all the benefits of red light, we would be here all night. But essentially, why it's so, you could say some of the main reasons it's being used is in the anti-aging community, it stimulates collagen. So actually it helps with wrinkles. So people want their wrinkles to go away, and they want natural, non-invasive, ways to do it that are not have side effects, right? And then it actually works really well for weight loss. A lot of clinics have red light machines and a whole weight loss cellulite protocol. So, and we can go through that if you like. I know we want to focus on cancer, but these are kind of what the clinics are getting red light for, right? Athletic performance. It actually stimulates mitochondrial function and increases muscle growth. It stimulates all kinds of great resiliency, antioxidant factors in the cells. So it helps with your performance and recovery. And then you have things like alopecia, like balding, right? I mean, you see these little red light caps all over the place. And you say, well, that's just a gimmick. It can't help with balding. Actually, it does if you get a therapeutic level. And it's also good for acne. Very, very good research on acne. And just overall wellness. So those are kind of like a lot of the clinics are using it for that. But red light therapy is so much more fundamental than just all these cosmetic and performance. It's actually working to kind of enhance mitochondrial function, which, as we've talked about in our past show, we know is kind of a root cause, or mitochondrial dysfunction as a root cause of cancer and other, diabetes, heart disease. Many lifestyle diseases can be linked to mitochondrial dysfunction, which then leads to inflammation and all these things that everybody talks about, like lack of oxygen, or the whole glycolysis with the mitochondrial not performing. So that cascades into all kinds of lifestyle diseases, including cancer, right?
Yeah. And let's just, because some people may be tuned in for the first time for this episode and they're interested in red light, can you give just a brief description of that, about what's happening with mitochondria in relation to cancer and how this connects? Yeah.
So again, most people, let's just kind of set this up. Most people that do red light are usually doing with panels. Is kind of the popular way now. But I always encourage people to do full body red light therapy because everything's interconnected. And again, if whether you have cancer or whatever lifestyle disease, you kind of want to work on your whole body. So I encourage people to get a full body red light exposure with either 4 or 6 panels, or if you can afford a red light bed like I have one, that's even better. So what red light is doing, the red and near infrared, and let's just start with the penetration, how nature kind of is very intelligent, as we know. Mother Nature is super intelligent. So if you put a flashlight up to your hand, what color comes out the other side?
Red.
Right. And there's a reason for that, because the deepest penetrating wavelengths of light are red and near infrared. And again, in my book, I have some like diagrams where you can see this. But it turns out like blue, green, yellow, other wavelengths hardly go 1 millimeter before they're absorbed. They're not hardly getting in at all. Through the eyes, if you're looking at, we hear about avoiding blue light at nighttime, but that's kind of going through the eyes. But on the skin, blue light's not going to go much more than 1 millimeter. And then if you get to far infrared, because the body's mostly water, the water's right there. When light goes in the body, the far infrared, the water just starts to absorb it right at the top there. So believe it or not, far infrared saunas, the wavelengths don't go as deep as red and near infrared. So, and that's a common, maybe it's important to mention this. That's a common confusion. People say, well, I have a sauna, or some people that have a sauna, or they think that red light takes the place of a sauna, but they're actually totally different. One is non-thermal use of light. It's important to emphasize that red and near infrared is non-thermal in the sense that it's like photosynthesis. We're trying to harness light to create energy like plants do. In fact, it's really just like plants do, only we're hybrid engines where plants can be totally solar powered. We do need a little bit of fuel but we can harness energy from light. But far infrared, the wavelengths are too long to do that. It's called photochemistry, where you're kicking electrons to higher orbitals in excited states that then drive an energy process in the mitochondria, right? So this is all important because this sets the stage for how does red light really work in the body? And they've actually know this very well. There's so many studies on this. It's with cytochrome C oxidase. So not to get too technical in molecular biology, but in your mitochondria, there's Krebs cycle. Then you have, once the NADH and FADH2 get synthesized from Krebs, they're like little molecular battery packs, right? Then those two high energetic molecules are then kind of fed into the electron transport chain, where those high energy electrons are passed down through 5 levels. There's 5 complexes. The 4th complex, and this is very important, this is where ATP is literally getting created. The 4th complex is cytochrome C. Okay, this is critical. Why? This is where oxygen actually docks. So we know oxygen is needed most of us know that we need oxygen for aerobic respiration, which we talked about last time, creates 38 molecules of ATP. So it gives you that's where good mitochondrial function comes from, is aerobic respiration. But if oxygen doesn't dock on cytochrome C, then guess what? It short circuits the entire electron transport chain. And what happens? The body reverts to glycolysis, lactic acid fermentation. So it is critical not only to have enough oxygen available, but that it has to dock on cytochrome C. And what's interesting, we talk about Dr. Otto Warburg sometime, but you know what Dr. Otto Warburg discovered in 1926? He was the one that discovered cytochrome C oxidase. So it turns out that this discovery, that he found that people that this is the enzyme, like it's an enzyme, it's critical for oxygen docking, and that it's also linked to cancer when the body's not expressing cytochrome C properly, if there's damage to the electron transport chain, or so there's a direct link between cytochrome C oxidase and either health or sickness or cancer. So it's what red light does. There's 5. Actually, in my book I talk about 4 or 5 different things it does to help this whole process. And again, when you really get this, this is what's cytochrome C is. Oh, let me say this: it's like a little mini solar panel. It's a porphyrin molecule. Okay. And without getting into the technicalities of porphyrins, guess what? Chlorophyll is also a porphyrin. It's literally a mini solar panel. In fact, this is not a metaphor. They make solar panels out of porphyrins, meaning your cytochrome C oxidase can be used by engineers to make a solar panel that's like a functioning solar panel to create energy to your house. So we literally have little solar panels in our mitochondria where oxygen is docking, and see that the light comes in. I don't know if we want to get into how solar panels work, but But essentially, light is coming in and electrons get excited to a higher energy state. And that excited electron is what drives the current flow that gives your house power. So sunlight is converted into electrical energy in your house. It's the same thing going on in the body, but now we're not dry semiconductors like solar panels are. We're wet. But again, easy water and some of the energetics of water do create a semiconductor-like effect within the mitochondria. So like a solar panel, we are kicking electrons up so the red light therapy is providing the energy, right? And why is it important to use red and near-infrared? Like I just explained, it's the deepest penetrating wavelength. So nature in her infinite wisdom has learned to harness the deepest penetrating wavelength of light to create energy. I mean, how smart is that, right? I mean, of course, now cytochrome C could have been tuned to like blue, but that wouldn't have been very wise because it's not getting in the body. So nature is harnessing the deepest penetrating light very wisely, so that way the whole body can get energized from light, not just the skin. So it's kind of interesting to see these fine-tuning effect with life and how we're so deeply coupled to the Earth's energies. Like the Schumann resonance our brain is totally coupled to the Schumann and the geomagnetic frequencies of the Earth, right? Again, by no accident, because again, we've evolved on this planet. So cytochrome C oxidase is like a little solar panel that helps oxygen to dock, and oxygen is sort of what's being as the final electron acceptor. And so what red light does is it kicks that electron to an excited state, and then from there, this whole process of the electron transport chain is basically pumping out hydrogen, right, across the mitochondrial membrane. And this creates a little battery. So it's this whole process of electrons flowing through the electron transport chain, pumping out protons, and then the final complex is ATPase, and that's what churns out ATP. So red light actually helps with that too, and we can get into that a little bit later. But why I want to focus so much on cytochrome C is that this has been linked with cancer, like the cytochrome C dysfunction and cancer are connected. And so what red light therapy does, besides just directly energizing and creating ATP, which of course, as we know, helps with mitochondrial function, but red light's been shown to increase the number of cytochrome C oxidase. So it's like it helps to rebuild those antennae, right? So it's almost like red light's helping the body to put up more solar panels in your mitochondria, or create more healthy mitochondria that have cytochrome C working properly. And even better, it's called mitochondrial biogenesis. Actually, red light therapy helps to increase the number of mitochondria in the cells. So now not only do you got more solar panels, but you got more power plants, right? Again, if mitochondrial functioning or dysfunction is our leading cause of cancer, the best thing you can do is create more healthy mitochondria to reverse cancer. I mean, say in some ways it's almost that simple. I mean, if you improve the functioning of your existing mitochondria, or you can increase and create new healthy mitochondria, both of those are going to power up the metabolism of your cell, and that's going to start to reverse cancer. I mean, and so it's pretty exciting. And then there's other things too with cytochrome C it's like a landing strip for oxygen, right? But now nitric oxide, the bad nitric oxide from, the INOS, the inducible nitric oxide, that can bind to cytochrome C, and it's sort of like clogging up a runway, like the plane has nowhere to land. So oxygen comes in, but nitric oxide's sitting there. And carbon monoxide can do this too. In fact, carbon monoxide not only can bind to hemoglobin but it can also bind to cytochrome C, because guess what? Hemoglobin also is a porphyrin. So hemoglobin theoretically would have the ability to absorb light like a solar panel too, but I haven't read the mechanisms aren't as well mapped out as the mitochondria. So one of the big mechanisms of red light is called photodisassociation of nitric oxide. So the red light comes in and it kicks out nitric oxide, and it clears the landing strip so oxygen can dock. And again, the health of your mitochondrial health and function depends on oxygen docking. That's the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, or glycolysis, and the proper using oxygen. Like I said, 38 molecules, or like 38 miles per gallon versus 2 or 4 miles per gallon. It's a huge energy difference if you're not able to use oxygen to create energy in the mitochondria.
Yeah. So let me.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And I'm just going to stop you for 1 second just to make sure that everyone is tracking. So what Brian is talking about is Otto Warburg, and if you guys are hearing panting in the background, my dogs just were running outside and now they're in here, they're panting behind me. Hopefully you can't hear that, but we're just going to roll with it. But so, if cancer is a metabolic condition as defined by Otto Warburg, which is this idea of cancer is the hallmark of cancer is seeing this shift of using oxidative phosphorylation which requires mitochondria, healthy and functional and, enough mitochondria. The switch. So the hallmark of cancer is the switch from using oxidative phosphorylation for generation of energy, which is our most efficient form of energy production of energy, as you described, to glycolysis or fermentation. The problem, as Otto Warburg outlined, is this problem of either dysfunctional mitochondria or deficient mitochondria. And what you're describing here is the cytochrome C oxidase is kind of the piece that explains how the mitochondria are not working, because basically the cytochrome C oxidase is required for oxygen to dock on the mitochondria. And so red light helps with that docking. So that's one thing. So it helps make our mitochondria more functional, right? So dealing with that dysfunctional problem. The other thing that it does is it kicks out nitric oxide, which could come in and take the place of oxygen, which we don't want to happen. So those two things are helping with the function of the mitochondria. And then the third thing that it does is mitochondrial biogenesis of increasing the production of the mitochondria. So this is why red light can be so valuable in cancer, is because if cancer is related to the dysfunctional and deficient mitochondria, this is a way that not only do we attack one of those things, like the, number of mitochondria, but it's also helping us make them more functional. So I just wanted to summarize that quickly, because we got into a lot of, complex words and names. And I just want people to make sure, like, okay, we're tracking with this. We've talked about this many times on this podcast, but I just want to make sure we keep it simple so that people, track. And I love actually all the details that you're giving.
Yeah, because the reason I can give so many details is red light, even probably better than PMF, is more, the research is so very well mapped out. I mean, it's not there's still maybe some debates on like the photodissociation mechanism, but that's the one that's still talked about in all the research literature. And in fact, almost every paper on photobiomodulation they always lead to that. They lead in with that, right? It's sort of like always talked about. And I'm just reading here from this Otto Warburg that he found this is important to mention, that he found that a healthy cell could be turned into a cancer cell just by inhibiting cytochrome C oxidase. And of course, that's what we just said, nitric oxide, it can be one inhibitor, but there can be other toxic environmental things that also can bind to CCO. That's probably CCO means cytochrome C oxidase. And so, so that's kind of, it kind of hones in on the whole, the switch, like you call it, right? On how the cytochrome C really is kind of that switch. Or you could say oxygen docking there or not is the switch, right? So, and again, you could have damage to this is the problem. If oxygen doesn't dock there, this is where inflammation comes from, by the way. ROS, reactive oxygen species, is the fundamental cause of inflammation and free radical damage. That's like the root free radical, the superoxide. It's O3 minus. It's like a very reactive oxygen species, right? That's why it's ROS. And so if oxygen doesn't dock on cytochrome, let's say it's plugged up or nitric oxide is there, guess what happens? Where does that oxygen go? It's a free radical. The oxygen starts to attack the other complexes in the mitochondria, and it starts to rust. Why do apples turn brown, and why does the old-fashioned cars rust? Oxidation. Yeah. It's oxygen. Oxygen's very oxidizing. It's very powerful free radical. So because of that, if oxygen can't dock there, then it just starts to run amok in the mitochondria and creating all kinds of damage.
Yeah. And this is a question that I want to ask you, because when I talked to Thomas Seyfried, he seemed to think, and this makes sense to me, but I just want to ask you your opinion on this, but he said that the DNA damage that in Western medicine we've been told is the cause of, uncontrolled cell growth. Rather than that being the cause, he thinks that it's really because when you have this problem where the oxygen doesn't dock and you start creating reactive oxygen species and you create inflammation, you then actually cause DNA damage with those reactive oxygen species. And that the DNA damage is really the effect rather than the cause of cancer.
That makes sense.
Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know it as well. Maybe that aspect is because I know he's done all those studies with putting a healthy nucleus into a cancer cell and vice versa, and seeing. Yeah, but it really is a cytoplasm problem more than a nucleus problem, cancer, right?
It makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And interesting from the easy water perspective, guess what ROS does? Is it makes water like stickier and muddier. It like gums up. So one of the things they found was with ROS, like say across these pores, like say ATPase, is where it's like this big turbine. That's actually where ATP is getting converted from ADP, right? So this is where the energy is created, but it comes from all those protons it's like a proton gradient, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like like a miniature battery. The mitochondria gets, so the whole electron transport chain is pumping out protons, creates an electrochemical gradient, just like a battery is. So you got a voltage potential, and that voltage kind of drives the protons now come in, and it spins that turbine on ATPase. But if the ROS is mucking up the water there, then it slows that down. And they found that red light speeds up the turbine and makes the water wetter. And so ROS has that other unpleasant effect of messing up the healthy water in the body because there's a lot of.
Can I just make sure I understand this correctly? So if the red light increases that turbine, does it help kind of clear that muddy, stickier water?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's actually a study on ATPs. Now this is where you want the near-infrared. Okay, it seems that the near-infrared interacts with water kind of in an easy water-like fashion that Dr. Gerald Pollack talks about, right? So when we have, it doesn't seem that the red is active. Well, it does create easy water, but not maybe as much as the more near-infrared. I think Gerald Pollack says the peak is like 3,100 nanometers. But the problem with 3,100 nanometers for easy water is it doesn't penetrate very far. So the beauty of using like 810 or 1064, like 980, those near-infrared wavelengths penetrate deeper, but really help to create the easy water, which is you get that nice separation with negative and positive. But you also get, maybe the gel-like state of water near the hydrophilic surface, but you do get that lower viscosity water in the middle with the protons flowing, right? So sometimes with Gerald Pollack, you got to remember when he did those studies with the vessels, right? He found greater flow going through. Actually, he could get flow going through without any pump, just with light.
Yeah.
So think of it like that. So just by shining light on a little vessel, and he would use some hydrophilic protein. It wasn't necessarily an actual blood vessel, but it was
Nafion.
Nafion. Yeah, he'd use Nafion. And he just shining so the red light will do this too. So just shining light on that will increase flow. So now you can see how red light helps with body-wide circulation too. So it increases nitric oxide, which is known to dilate the blood vessels and help with blood flow. But I think even more so, it's creating easy water to help with this flow like Dr. Gerald Pollack has found within vessels. Because not only him, but it goes back to Gregory Ling, where they did the math and there's just not enough pump force in the heart to pump all the blood through the body. There's just no way.
Yeah.
So
and
there's got to be something else. Yeah. There's got to be something else that's pumping the blood through your whole body. And that's this whole process that Dr. Gerald Pollack, I think that makes the most sense to me because, cancer, another problem with cancer, and this goes for the lymph too, lymph flow and blood flow, because people with cancer have very stagnant lymph. So again, reactive oxygen species, think of it stickiness. So if everything is like stuck in the mud, then you get the stagnant lymph and blood that's not flowing, the clumpy blood, stagnant lymph. And this just exacerbates everything because now the oxygen can't get to the mitochondria in the first place. Forget about docking there. If you've got poor circulation, it can't get there in the first place because the capillaries are so small that the red blood cells have to fold in half just to get in through there, right? So if you got the Rouleau effect going on where you get all the red blood cells stacking like coins, it just hits into the capillary, it just can't get in.
Yeah, and explain that for people because on my podcast we haven't talked about the Rouleau effect. So
right, exactly. So basically red blood cells have a voltage just like cells do, but it's different. It's like a healthy red blood cell should be about 15 millivolts. Healthy cell should be more like 70, right? But again, red blood cells don't have a nucleus. So red blood cells are a different type of cell than most of our other cells that have a nucleus. But they do have a voltage. And when that voltage drops to 13 millivolts, then now think about it. It makes sense, right? When you lose charge, remember, like repels like, right? Have you ever seen I used to do a little pith ball experiment in physics in college, when I taught college physics. You get these two little styrofoam balls, you add charge to them, and they just fly apart. And it's because it's electrostatic repulsion, right? So if your red blood cells are charged to 15 millivolts, they can't stick together because the electrostatic repulsion you can think of it like two north poles of a magnet, if that's easier to visualize. Mm-hmm. If you take two north poles of a magnet, they just push each other apart. If your magnet gets if you lose magnetism, then you can easily push it apart, and it'll, So that energy, that repulsive energy, is what. Well, PMF definitely helps to increase that voltage, but I mean, my hypothesis is red light does too, because again, the hemoglobin have porphyrins. Heme is a porphyrin. In fact, there's different liver enzymes that also have porphyrin. So we have porphyrin molecules in different enzymes in the body, but the most important one is hemoglobin and cytochrome C oxidase. Probably, I mean, they're the two maybe one of the most important molecules in all of nature is porphyrins.
And so just to close this loop for people, hemoglobin and red blood cells, when they are adequately charged at around 15 millivolts, basically they repel each other. They don't stick together.
They don't stick,
But if you start to lose that charge, they can stick together and they can create something called the Rouleau effect, which is basically like a stack of coins. Or basically
it looks like a coin. And so, and the problem, of course, with that is obvious, right? So if the capillaries can only fit one red blood cell at a time, and it has to fold in half, literally, it barely fits even one at a time, how could a whole bunch of them stuck together? It's like having like 10 people walk through a door that are all stuck together. Like if you're somehow all like tied together where you can't like separate and try to get it through a door, I mean, maybe you could. Now, of course, this is not an all or nothing. Otherwise, somebody would die, right? You're going to still have some red blood cells that'll make it through. But the more Rouleau you have, the worse it gets. And that comes from thick blood and losing what's called the zeta potential. The zeta potential of the blood is kind of an energetic property of the blood. And so when that collapses, you get Rouleau and thick blood. And again, there's many sources of causing that. But it's kind of all related to what we're talking about, because it's, basically, and red light can reverse that too, because again, that to me, that involves the collapse of the easy water. Like if you just kind of lose that whole structure, it just collapses. And then you get all these unfavorable liquid properties of blood that come from co-effects, right? Where things just start to get thicker. This happens like in diabetics, their blood is very thick. And it's because all the sugar in their blood, but it's just very low. There's very low charge. There's lower charge on their hemoglobin. And again, this is why diabetics will end up with eye problems and kidney issues, because those are where the blood vessels are the thinnest and the smallest, right? Because their blood is and that's why they get diabetic ulcers on their feet, because they got to get the blood all the way in the feet. It's hard to get the blood all the way down there and all the way back up against gravity, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have thick blood, these are the vulnerable areas in the body, right? So kind of improving our zeta potential, what red light will do and PMF will do and some of these therapies, and drinking good water, eating an anti-inflammatory diet. Again, think sticky blood like ROS, reactive oxygen. So if you have free radicals and if your body's inflamed, typically your blood is thicker for the most part because the ROS makes the blood stickier and muddier or thicker, right? So we don't want maple syrup flowing through our veins. We want it. Now, we don't want it to be totally like totally water, because it does, then things can't clot if you cut yourself, you just keep bleeding, right? So you need a certain amount of platelets in your blood to create blood clots when necessary. But usually people are in the other direction.
Yeah.
Rarely, I mean, it's rare that somebody has blood that's too thin, unless you take too much blood thinning medication, then you can, but that's artificial, right? That all plays into this whole process though, right? And red light is one of the known mechanisms that increases nitric oxide.
Yeah, so actually I wanted you to speak to this because earlier you spoke about nitric oxide, but the bad nitric oxide docking on the
cytochrome C,
cytochrome C oxidase. So can you explain this about nitrite is good, and and there's also the kind that so
this is very important. I'm glad you brought that up, because so nitric oxide is sort of Janus face, sort of like the Greek Janus god, right? There's two faces, right? So the good nitric oxide is typically like the endothelial or a neuronal nitric oxide. The nitric oxide is what's created on the inside of your blood vessels that does help to widen or dilate the blood cells, right? Now the iNOS, or the bad guy, typically is an inflammatory, like an overinflamed response where there's too much nitric oxide. And too much nitric oxide it's a free radical and it causes damage. Just like ROS is a reactive oxygen species. But we know oxygen is good. We need oxygen, right? Well, there's something called RNS, reactive nitrogen species, okay, that just like ROS are the bad form of nitric oxide. So just like oxygen is important and nitric oxide is important, their evil twin is not good. And again, it's kind of shifting the body. And what red light does is it kind of shifts the teeter-totter on both ROS and RNS to more the healthy nitric oxide and the healthy oxygen binding. And so while oxygen binding is the healthy way that oxygen should be handled in the body, with nitric oxide, when red light kicks out, this is one thing red light does, right, is it kicks out nitric oxide through photodissociation. And guess what? Now that nitric oxide is liberated, that can diffuse into the extracellular and be beneficial now. So where it was bad in one role, like binding the cytochrome C, when it gets kicked out, because the nitric oxide is still nitric oxide, all of a sudden now it can be with a good guy, right? So it's very important to know that both oxygen and nitric oxide are two of the most important molecules for our health. Yet they do, because they're very powerful free radicals, if they're not in balance, they can cause damage like any free radical can. So just like oxygen can cause a rust, it's oxidative. Nitric oxide's oxidative too. They're both, but again, that's that high power electronegativity that gives rise to its healing properties too. So it's kind of this double-edged sword, right?
Okay, perfect. So now you were starting to talk about the good benefits of nitric oxide. So, and I just wanted to make sure we talked about how it could have been, a problem before. So
yeah. Because nitric oxide was the molecule of the year in 1992, right? And actually there was a Nobel Prize won around its discovery. In fact, Time magazine had a big article, molecule of the year, nitric oxide. It was right on the cover of Time magazine even. So it was a big deal. And I guess they do molecules of the year. I didn't even know.
I didn't know that.
I mean, maybe they don't anymore. Maybe that was just a special edition, but we all hear about nitric oxide from cardiac health and circulation. And it's so important for our circulation and longevity because one of the main reasons that we die, in fact, besides cancer, what's the other main leading cause of death?
Heart disease. Heart
disease, exactly. And probably edges cancer if you include stroke. If you put stroke and heart attack and all cardiovascular disease, it's going to the number of deaths will be greater than cancer. But they're both right up there, right? So where does that come from? It comes from your pipes getting clogged up, basically. So, I mean, they get stiff, arterial sclerosis, and then atherosclerosis is they get clogged up, a buildup, right? So what nitric oxide does is it helps with both of those problems and it's helping to widen the blood vessels, make them wider, which means it loosens them, makes them less stiff, right? So it's got like this loose ability to make the blood vessels more like resilient, where they have more flexibility. Yeah, flexible, right? And then just by the widening effect, you got more blood now able to come through, and that almost kind of helps to wash away some of the buildup, right? You got and then again, you have, with better circulation comes the immune cells can come, like the macrophages can come and clean things up. Because again, the body knows when there's an imbalance and it can heal itself. But if everything's just all plugged up, it can't even get the immune cells to do what they're supposed to do. Then you have to end up getting a stent or something to help and those can be life-saving, but it's like nitric oxide is a biochemical stent. It's opening up the blood flow, and red light has been shown to directly increase nitric oxide. And there's many mechanisms. One is from these molecules, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but around 660 to 670 nanometer red light has been shown to directly create nitric oxide from certain nitrogen molecules that reside in the body, right? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like red light is almost like a nitric oxide generating like engine in a way. So when you're laying under a red light bed, you're generating nitric oxide, beneficial nitric oxide. And again, and you're helping to lower the bad guys. That's what's beautiful. It's like a teeter-totter, right? With both oxygen and nitrogen and nitric oxide. red light actually tips the teeter-totter both in the favorable direction for ATP production, oxidative phosphorylation, and tips the nitric oxide teeter-totter in the form of the endothelial nitric oxide for circulation, right? And so it kind of liberates nitric oxide. And so it's almost like the villain becoming the hero. It's like he was, he was doing all this damage, but now he's been
released.
He kind of like, he realized that it's like a new vision of what he could become. And it's like, I'm going to be a good guy now and I'm going to help this person be. It just shows you how life kind of teeters on this razor's edge, right? I mean, so if we do all these healthy lifestyle choices that you talk about in all your podcasts, you tip the teeter-totter, you tip the scales in the right direction. So you get the favorable oxygen docking and energy aerobic respiration, and you get the favorable nitric oxide for circulation.
I love that. What I would love to do is to talk about practical, how can people get red light from the sun? And then if we're thinking about using red light therapy or it's photobiomodulation, right? Is that the name?
Photobiomodulation.
It's a mouthful. I think that's why people say red light.
Exactly.
It's so long.
It is.
But I'm wondering if you can tell people, okay, what are the natural ways that we can be getting red light? You already talked about in terms of the sun, but it's like, is it any time of day? And kind of thinking about that piece. And then I would love to dive into if someone wants to do red light, what should they be looking for in a device and kind of guiding people in that direction?
Yeah. And again, we just talked about nitric oxide ATP. There's also a whole nother talk about the anti-inflammatory effects of nitric oxide, of red light therapy, and the tissue regenerative effects of increasing growth factors and so not only does it help with circulation and ATP mitochondrial function, but those begin the cascades of all these regenerative pathways too. So there's so many there's so many wonderful benefits. But getting into the practical, just how can I enjoy these benefits, right? So with the sun, there's different schools of thought on ultraviolet light, because some say only get early morning sun exposure because you want to avoid the UV damage, right? But it's like, well, don't you want vitamin D though? So it's like, I don't know that that's really a settled. So obviously it's clear that you don't want to sit out in the sun too long.
But I think that this is a question. Is what is the optimal time to get red light? Because the way that I talk to clients about it is that you can get red light from the sun without getting the UV exposure in the early morning and then the evening. And then you can go out in midday to get your vitamin D. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of getting that red light, what are, some of the things that people can think about in getting that red light from the sun?
Yeah. Again, from the sun, you're correct. What you said. So now, as far as like how much red light is there in the morning compared to noonday, in noonday, there's less atmosphere for all light to go through. So you're always going to be getting more in the middle of the day, but you get more of the UV as well, right? So I think it's just, you got to have a little common sense with not overdoing the UV exposure. Because to me, it's like, my common sense is like, if I'm peeling and I'm burned, I've overdone it. Yeah. If I'm not burned and I'm not peeling, I'm probably fine. Maybe that's just too simplistic, but I like to get out in the sun almost every day, but I only do a short period of time. I don't overdo it. And if I start getting peel, I think I'm getting a little too much right now. Then I know it's like, okay, Bryant, you're doing too much. And then I back off, right? So I don't think it's really rocket science. I think we kind of know when we're getting too much, if we just pay attention. But sun, the sun shouldn't be a big scare. Like people, I don't want to get skin cancer. They just think they should avoid the sun. But you're missing out on basically a free way, a type of therapy, heliotherapy, right? It's actually back in the early 1900s, they had heliotherapy clinics up in the mountains where they basically would go up and they would send people that had like almost incurable diseases just up in the fresh mountain air and give them daily sun baths. That was, and actually a Nobel Prize was won with healing some disease with sunlight. Anyway, so yes, don't be too scared, but yet there is something to say about overdoing the sun. Obviously, we see all the people from here in Florida, right, where they're clearly doing too much sun exposure, right, where their skin gets leathery and but probably doing too much there. So but the nice thing about red light therapy is there's no UV, right? So you can get that full dose of, in fact, you can get a more concentrated dose of red light to power up your mitochondria, improve nitric oxide, healing, regeneration, help with wrinkles, and all these wonderful things without having to worry about UV and not having to worry about if it's cloudy outside or if you live in Seattle or, some places that don't get that much sun, right? So in probably in a perfect world, if we really spent enough time outdoors, we probably could get all of the red light that we needed from the sun.
Yeah. Well, and in the past we did, right? Before we were living in houses and yes.
But it's like, I guess, go ahead, yeah.
Well, and one of the things, so just so that people know kind of what I recommend in terms of the sun, if someone wants to be getting red light and vitamin D from the sun with staying safe with UV exposure, Brian is exactly right that we are designed to be in the sun. And as long as you're out and building up slowly so that you don't get burned, when you just go out and spend an hour in midday sun without, working your way up to that, that's going to be a problem. But as much time as you can spend in the sun without burning is a very good recommendation. But if people are nervous and say you have very fair skin or whatever, there is an app that's called D-Minder. And it's a way for you to calculate how much sun exposure to get with your skin type, given your location geographically and the latitude, so that you get the vitamin D that you need without burning. And so that's an option. If someone is fair-skinned and worried about burning, going out in the morning to get your, red light or in the evening, and then using the D-Minder app in the midday is one way that you can do that without worrying that you're going to get yourself into trouble. So I just wanted to throw that out there for people.
And also wear your Speedo and your bikini because you want as much skin. Or if you got the privacy of a backyard with fence around it, just get your whole solar panel out there, right? Because we do photosynthesize like plants. So the more surface because clothes do block sunlight.
Absolutely.
So the more clothes you have, you're going to get less heliotherapy. Now, I'm not saying you got to be mindful of your neighbors. Don't be too but the more skin, the better. Really, I mean, that's one of the best ways.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you can do naked, I'm just going to say it. If you can do naked sunbathing and you have the privacy to do it, do it. That's the best way to do it. Front and back. Get your whole solar panel, like just flip the burger. Kind of get, But it's really, I mean, it's good for the sex hormones to do that. Yeah. Because if you got that area covered, you're not, those they're kind of missing out. It's like, hey, give us some sun, But I get it. In this day and age, most people can't do that. But
you have the privacy, absolutely.
But if you have the privacy, that's the best way to do it. In fact, the Mito podcast, my friend what's his name? He interviewed me, and that's something he's been doing for a long time. And it's like, I used to do that too. I can't do it now where I'm living now. But my old place, I was totally fenced in, no neighbors. Every day out in the sun. So, but certainly red light panels is a good way to supplement, just like, walking barefoot, grounding, earthing, and, PMF, not being outside, getting enough of the Earth's magnetism. So supplement with PMF, red light panels and red light therapy is a good way to supplement not getting enough of, the red light from the sun. And
So tell us, what should people be considering when they're looking at either purchasing red light for themselves, or maybe they're going to a place? Is all red light the same if you go to the tanning salon that has a red light versus a wellness spa?
That's, I'm glad you brought that up because yes, the tanning salons a lot of times have the red fluorescent tubes. That is not how you want to do red light. That's not going to give you therapeutic red light therapy. Unfortunately, a lot of people go to the tanning salons, and they're cheaper. I mean, obviously the tanning salons don't want to spend the money for a good red light bed because they can get the cheap ones a lot cheaper. But the problem is because they're not LEDs, they're just basically putting like a red coating around the fluorescent light bulb, around the tube, right? So you're not getting real red light. I mean, you do get a little bit because even if you take like just red, I mean, you get red color therapy if you put a big red transparent thing up to the sun, red's coming through. So obviously there is some, it's filtering out some wavelengths and letting red through, but it's just not the ideal way to do it. I mean, LEDs can give you very precise wavelengths and the well-known ranges of, it's like 600 to 700 and 800 to 900 nanometers, roughly. I would say 600 to like 670, 680, and then 800 to like 860, 870. Those are the peak cytochrome C oxidase absorption spectrum. And so you notice that 700 is not in there. Why is that? Well, the 700s do penetrate fairly well, but they don't get absorbed by cytochrome C. They're not bioactive wavelengths. It's sort of like taking a multivitamin that just goes right through you. It doesn't do anything. So you want to, but again, I found most red light panels and beds seem to have the right wavelengths, more or less. The problem is they're either underpowered, usually underpowered, sometimes overpowered. So you don't want to do too much red light, but the problem is usually most of these panels are just some of the cheap ones from China. You're not getting enough irradiance. And some of those little like pads you lay on, they got these full body red light pads now. It's like Christmas tree light irradiances. And again, if you don't have fans to cool off your LEDs, you're probably way underpowered. Because again, most good panels that are high powered, they have little fans in them because you're getting a lot of energy, so they do heat up. But of course, LEDs are going to heat up because 70% of LEDs is like gets thermalized. So if you're just laying on a bed of red light little bulbs and you don't feel any warmth or hardly any at all, I mean, you're probably not getting what's considered to be. Michael Hamblin is one of the experts on photobiomodulation, one of the world experts, right? He says you want to get at least 5 milliwatts per centimeter squared in irradiance. So we were talking about wavelength. Now, irradiance is like the power or how much of that wavelength, right? So it's like how bright is the light? So you can think of like the colors of the rainbow as like a wavelength. You know, each color has a different wavelength, right? Mm-hmm. And how bright the bulb is your irradiance. A brighter has got more energy. So you do need a certain amount of brightness or irradiance from your red light panel or bed, or it's just not therapeutic. You're just not getting enough. So typically, I think, based on my research, if you look at the peak irradiances of the sun, like in sunny areas of the world, you should be getting around 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared at least. But you don't want to go too high. You know, some of the panels go over like 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared, even though they really don't because they're not measuring it right. But if they were measuring it right, that would be too much. So what happens is it's called the biphasic dose response with red light. And this is well mapped out in research, right? That there is a Goldilocks zone of just the right amount of irradiance, right? If you don't get enough, you get no effect. But if you get too much, it causes ROS and oxidative stress. So again, you can tip the teeter-totter too far. It's like overtraining, right? You know, we know exercise is good. So a little stress is good. It's hormesis, right? A little stress is good, strengthens our body, makes us more resilient. But if we get too much stress, that's called eustress, right? The good stress. But if we get too much stress, which includes red light therapy, then we cause oxidative stress and cause problems. So it's been shown that too much irradiance will increase ROS, where just the right amount it's weird. It's really interesting. You get a temporary burst of ROS, just like exercise. And what that does is it stimulates this NRF2 pathway that stimulates antioxidant proteins. It's like a strengthening, right? You're doing a little bit of stress and your body responds by making itself stronger. But if you do too much stress, then the body can't respond to become stronger because you've overdone it. It's like overcooking the turkey in a way. You can think of it like that too.
So how would people know so obviously the tanning salon, like how would they know to ask? Like what are they asking for these places that they might go to do red light therapy to have a sense of whether it is in the right range? I
mean, if you're getting like a full body bed and it's actual LED, and you'll know it's LEDs or tubes, it's obvious. If they just have the big long red tubes, look like big long fluorescent light bulbs, then you know it's not what you want. LEDs are like little, they're little ball. I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of LEDs in the bed. So it's very obvious that it's a good bed or not, right? If you're getting a whole body bed, you almost don't have to worry. You're going to probably get enough irradiance. I doubt that there's going to be a problem.
Okay. As
long as you're not getting the tubes. Again, remember, if they look like red fluorescent light bulbs, that's not the kind of red light therapy you want.
Okay. And then, so that's if they're going to a place, is they're looking for the ones that has all the little lights.
Usually thousands of them. And they're just a full, and that's why they're more expensive. It's a lot more expensive to use that many thousands of LEDs than it is to use like a dozen red light tubes, like fluorescent tubes.
Yeah.
They're really just coated with it's sad that people are thinking that's red light therapy.
And can you speak to, this is one of the things people are buying red light. There's so many devices now to buy red lights, and maybe not even the big beds, but the panels and then the smaller devices. Are there things that people should be watching out for? I know when we talked about the PMF devices and you gave us some cautions, is there a similar, things that we should be looking out for and not purchasing in terms of red light?
Yeah, I would not get it's a big trend right now to get these cheap Chinese like full body red light mats. It's almost like just a little yoga, like a big long yoga mat that's got all these red light bulbs woven in. They're just ridiculously low irradiance. You're not getting enough. Now the panels can be a good option, but to get full body red light, which is my book is on full body red light therapy, because I do think it's important to get a full body immersion. You can't use a little small panel and think you're going to cover your whole body. It just doesn't work. You need the silhouette of your body outlined in the panel which means you've got to get 4 or 6 full big panels of say platinum, or Mito Red or Red Rush or Juve or all those popular brands, right? They're all pretty good. I wouldn't settle. Some of the off-brand ones are just coming straight from China, and some don't have enough irradiance. So, someone like I think his name's Alex Ferguson on YouTube. He's got like a really good reviewing channel, and he uses the same spectroradiometer that I have. Spectroradiometers measure the irradiance accurately. A lot of companies are deceptive with using solar meters to measure irradiance. That's not how you measure light. So they end up reporting irradiances that are twice of what they really are. So and my book at redlightbook.net, you can actually read it for free right now, redlightbook.net. I have a whole chapter on irradiance and it's kind of like a buyer's guide in a way, is understanding which wavelengths, which irradiance, and kind of how I help people to see through some of the deceptions out there.
And what chapter is that?
That's chapter 11 is on irradiance.
Irradiance. Well, what we'll do is we'll link.
Really important. Yeah, irradiance is typically they get the wavelengths more or less right. Typically the problem is the irradiance.
Okay, so we'll link this to the show notes so people can go there and read that, because I think this is really important.
Yeah,
is that when you're purchasing these machines, that it's going to get you in that Goldilocks zone, and we don't want to be causing more problems, obviously, with doing these therapies.
I mean, I like the cooking the turkey analogy. If you don't have enough irradiance, it's like putting your turkey in the oven at 150 degrees. It's not going to cook. Right. And doing too much irradiance is like putting it at 500 degrees. It'll cook, but you're going to get a burned outside and then a frozen inside. I mean, so there's like a Goldilocks range of irradiances and time. And that's the other thing is dosage or time. Most of the full body beds that have a good irradiance, you really only need 15 to 20 minutes 3 times a week. So you can and you don't have to do 3 times a week forever. Based on some of the photobiomodulation studies I've looked at, if you do 3 times a week just for a month, with say a Novathor or like a good, like our bed, our Spectra red light, where I say Novathor because they're in more locations now. Eventually our bed hopefully will be in locations. So, because I am involved with in the production of what I think is the best red light bed, but it's very expensive though. And I know most people don't have like $65,000 to spend. So the beds, but the really good beds that's why you go to a clinic, right? Novathors cost $140,000, right? So, and I do have a Novathor in my house. So, I mean, but most people don't have that much money to spend. So that's where the panels are usually a better option. But if you can get a good package at a clinic and use a really good red light bed, like say our bed or Novathor.
What is your bed called? Novathor is the other one, and then yours is?
Ours is spectraredlight.com, spectraredlight.com. Okay. And we also have a full body panel, but at $17,000, just because we're just doing things that nobody else is doing. So I get it. We're not really catering to the people looking for the best price, but I do understand that people need to watch their budget. So, like I said, like Platinum, Mito Red, Red Rush, Juve, the well-known name brands are going to have good irradiances, and they're going to have, you just got to be careful for the off brands. Mm-hmm. And like I said, try to get at least 4 of them. You're going to have to spend like probably $5,000 or $6,000 at least to get a full body immersion. Because to me, that's the way to do it. Just one panel, you're only getting red light straight on from that silhouette, and actually mostly right in the middle. The problem with that is people don't realize most of the red light is this little like a little line down your chest. If you're standing in front of one of the panels, you're just not getting full body coverage. I mean, it's it's still good, but it's not as good as getting like say, ideally 6, because 6, the whole silhouette of your body can fully fit in 6 panels, unless you're like really big. But most people. And that typically does cost, like $5,000 or $6,000 at least. But yes, it's a worthwhile investment. Again, good PMF devices can also be in that ballpark, Yeah. So I think it's well investing in quality and doing it right.
Yeah. Or if you can't purchase, finding a clinic that has those units that are, give you that value, it's worthwhile to do that. So,
well, yeah, let me finish that train of thought. So if you do, let's say in a Novathor 3 times a week for a month, then you can just do once a week. They found that if you do just once a week after that, in fact, in the study, they did 12 sessions with the control groups. This is a fibromyalgia study with the Novathor. And they only did 12 sessions total. And they did a 3-month checkup. 3 months later, they were still doing good. So the benefits lasted. So even
and that was just and they didn't do anything, not even once a week.
No, they didn't do once a week. I'm just saying, to me, ideally, because it's like brushing your teeth. It's like charging up like PMF, right? Why not charge up your cells and your mitochondria every day, or at least once a week with a full body bed?
Yeah.
So that, because I know some of these places will charge, it depends where you go, but sometimes you can get $60 to $80 for a bed session. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But if you just think of it, I'm just going to spend this money 3 times a week for a month. And then after that, do once a week, then it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Right? Or invest in a full body panel and just do it right and get the full immersion. But again, with the panels, you still got to go front and back.
Yeah.
With a bed, you're getting it all at once. And I'm telling you, I've used panels are good, but when you go to a bed, it's like a whole nother experience.
Yeah. Well, I know that because
it's an upgrade, definitely. I could feel it in the gym. You know where I noticed it was when my strength in my workouts, when I first started using the full body bed, it was just like 30% more strength. It was like it was undeniable, right? And I had been using like just half of a bed type of, it was a half bed, but not enough irradiance. It was those two problems. It was not enough irradiance and only half of the bed. And
I do know too from myself that when I was going to a clinic that had a bed and got the whole body 3 times a week for 15 minutes, I felt different. My skin looked different. It's definitely a different game. So absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming back and talking to us about red light this time. Yeah. And I think we also are going to do another session with you about electrosmog and how to protect our homes. Too. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that. But tell everyone again where to find you. We will make sure we put all the links to your YouTube and your website on here.
Yeah, my site, just to contact me, is just bryantmeyers.com, just my name.com, all one word, BRYANTMEYERS.com. If if you're interested in the market for both either PMF or red light, feel free to call me. My book is available for free. Pretty much it's online. It's just like a website, but chapter by chapter. But you can still read the book online at redlightbook.net. But hopefully within, I don't know how long it will take to get it published, but at some point it will be a book that'll be available. But there's a lot. There's a buyer's guide in there. It's got tons of information. In fact, I go into much more detail on all these things we talked about. And so, it's a good resource for learning about red light and as a buyer's guide to make sure you get the right one.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to the next time.
Yes, likewise. All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining me on Born to Heal. It's been a privilege to share this time with you, and I hope that today's episode has offered you valuable insights on your journey toward optimal health. Please consider subscribing, sharing this podcast with your friends, and leaving us a review. To learn more about how you can work with me, please visit katiedeming.com. You can find additional resources in the episode show notes linked below, and remember to join us next week as we continue to explore more holistic approaches to healing. Until then, this is Dr. Katie Deming, reminding you that just like me, you were born to heal.